My name is David Hurley.
My name is Shakir Chambers.
My name is Michael Hay.
I formerly worked for Harper's Prime Minister's office and for the Ontario government on Doug Ford's election campaign.
I ran 2 national campaigns for the Liberal Party under the leadership of Paul Martin.
In 2017, I was Jagmeet Singh's leadership campaign director.
This election will be divisive.
And the last one for at least 2 of the major party leaders.
This election will be historic.
We are going to start tonight with a problem that pretty much every party is dealing with, either during the campaign or just before it. Candidates' past behavior now coming to light. Already 5 candidates have been forced to drop out, most because of old social media posts. And there's also another strategy at play. The Liberal War Room is digging up their own videos of Conservative candidates saying controversial things. Andrew Scheer's response?
If anything that they've ever said in the past caused any type of hurt or disrespect to one community or another, and have apologized for that, I accept that.
Okay, let's bring in our War Room panel, Shakir, David, and Michael. Good to see you all again. Our second Sunday of the campaign.
The elections are exciting.
Yeah, they are, and just getting started, really. Let's start with this issue around candidates' past problems. We saw it in the last campaign, but it wasn't the same numbers and it wasn't the same kind of speed at which we're seeing it now. I want to start with Andrew Scheer's response. He did that on an airplane, middle of the night, wanted to make sure he got a handle on it. Shakir, is it enough just to say candidates have apologized? Let's move on.
I think it is enough in the sense of if you add context. I think today when he gave his response, he added that contextual kind of analysis to it. I think if a candidate 10, 15 years ago had a tweet or a Facebook post that was kind of wrong, I guess you can say, I'm sorry and I want to move forward and I apologize. But if it's a pattern of behavior, month after month, year after year, you're posting these same controversial kind of messaging, then yeah, we need to revisit and kind of remove the candidate if that's the decision you want to take.
It does seem to have been a pattern of behavior for at least one of the candidates that the Conservative Party is keeping, who was not greenlit by the provincial party, who has said multiple things that are offensive to multiple communities, and I guess has apologized and they're sticking with her. What do you make of that, David? What does that tell you about Conservative strategy?
Well, it's really perplexing because this is not a new tactic, what the Liberal War Room is doing. In fact, the Liberal War Room in Ontario has done that in the past, and the federal Liberal War Room is being run by the Ontario Liberal War Room people. And secondly, the Conservatives themselves did it to the NDP in the provincial election in Ontario. So there's no excuse not for having anticipated that. The first week of the campaign, no week of the campaign has more thought given to it than the first week of the campaign. You plan it weeks, if not months in advance. You know every event you're going to. It has a strategic purpose for what you want to say in the first week. And how you would end up going to candidate after candidate who has a problem like that and not have anticipated this is, well, it's just a huge blunder.
Yeah, because let's be clear, and maybe you can explain it a bit, Shakir, you do vet your own candidates, right? The parties go through their own backgrounds and make sure there's nothing weird there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think on that particular point, there's this thing of like a calculated risk. I think for a lot of parties, not just the Conservative Party, there are probably candidates who you think might give you a certain reward in your writing, whether it's fundraising, whether it's media hits, whatever it may be. And you probably assess they might have a bad message on the internet, like one bad tweet. So the reward is probably greater than like that issue, and we can manage that moving forward because there's a significant benefit. I think that might have gone into some of the considerations. I'm not 100% sure, but ultimately I think some of these candidates, some of the things that I've seen for sure, one of them was like 10 or 12 years ago by a candidate, and it was used in a totally different context. In society, our bars of tolerance have raised significantly in the past 10 or 15 years. It's hard to hold somebody accountable for that same standard 10 or 15 years ago that we have today.
Yeah, I mean, if you say something as a teenager and now you're a candidate and you can't go back and clean your social media, I think some of that makes sense. What do you make of the Scheer response, though, Michael? The way he's saying, okay, you've apologized, I can accept that. What does that tell you?
I think that, well, first of all, I think that Scheer tried to have a blanket apology for any future candidates as well, which is problematic and not good enough. And an apology from a candidate is not the same thing as making it clear what they believe in today. And so we would want to make sure that anybody running for any party doesn't hold Islamophobic, racist, homophobic, or anti-women values. And I think that's that's what's really important here. I also wonder what impact this has on the election. And for me, I think voters will decide based on how the parties respond to these candidates coming forward. Do they try to hide them first? Do they stand by them, as we see Scheer standing by 4 or 5 candidates today that have said and done problematic things? Or do they drop them? Do they get rid of them as swiftly as they can and try to move on, which I think the NDP did very clearly. The other thing I'm thinking about too is that there's a moral element to this. I don't think that candidates being Islamophobic or racist or having the wrong values that don't align with Canadians, should be a political strategy for the Liberals. If the Liberals know that that candidates hold these values, then I don't think that they should be sitting on this information for strategic plays. They should be letting voters know.
So I will say there was a Liberal candidate that the Liberals had to pull before the campaign started who was saying anti-Semitic things and obviously couldn't continue, and they removed him. So it's not like anybody's got this right. Everybody has problem candidates. You want to?
No, but everybody has. I mean, like every party has large numbers of ridings that it's very difficult to field a credible candidate.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So this is not particularly a conservative problem. They may have a pattern of a certain type of problem on social conservatism, etc. But so that isn't the issue. So the issue is, as Michael said perfectly, how do you handle it? And to get this off the table, he's already lost a week. Scheer has to, give a really strong statement about what his values are and what the values of the party are. And second of all, he's got to find 2 or 3 symbolic sacrificial lambs and get rid of them.
Get rid of them. Shakir?
I'm not sure that's the case. I think 2 things here. I think one is that and when you're in this position, ultimately, none of us are getting any younger. As people move forward and we have other candidates coming out, the younger candidates, their whole life is going to be based on social media, right? So I think we need to get to the point where we're judging people for what they are today and not what they were 10 years ago on a certain post, right? If someone's views have evolved and they're a different person, I think we should be able to say, okay, give a second opportunity. This is why it makes Canada so great. We give people other opportunities and allow them to move forward on that message and on that different kind of path that they've chosen. I think continually harping on the past of someone's behavior online, I don't think that's the correct way to go about assessing our candidates.
Well, so let's talk about why the Liberals, not why they're doing it, it's obvious why they're doing it, and they're doing it really strategically so that when Andrew Scheer appears in a riding, that's when they drop a video because he's going to be seen with a candidate who is, who has supports abortion or whatever, who has said controversial things in the past. Is this the right message for Liberals who have been always talking about a positive message, right? And sunny ways and all that stuff. And this looks like the opposite of that. I'm not saying that these people shouldn't be exposed if they have controversial viewpoints, but I wonder how it plays to the notion that Liberals are not out there to have a messy, ugly campaign. What do you think, Michael?
I think it is important that the Liberals are exposing this about the Conservative candidates. I do think, though, that they should just put it all out there if they have it, and they shouldn't be sitting on it. If you know that about a candidate, voters have a right to know that this is a candidate's belief set, that this is their value system. I think that the Liberals are very focused, it seems, on putting the Conservatives on defense so that they can continue to run a campaign that is based on their 2015 campaign and has Justin Trudeau not running on his record from the last 4 years.
Yeah. What do you think of it? I mean, I know politics is mean. I mean, I'm not naive, but I just wonder how it plays to the branding.
I don't think that people will actually see this as coming from the Liberal Party. I don't think they're going to get tarred from it. And it really looks, frankly, like it's coming from media. When you see the headlines, you don't see Liberals press Scheer on this. You see Scheer pressed on such a thing. And these things are catnip for the media. They're going to report them. So he's got to take this issue off the table. Or he's not. I mean, it's worked perfectly for the Liberals, as Michael said, because there's no message from the Conservative Party in this first week of the campaign.
Well, I mean, today they got their message through because it was such a big policy drop. So obviously we had to give that the time it deserved. But then there's a second story, of course, about these other issues, particularly because today Scheer was asked, well, why didn't you apologize for the things you said about same-sex marriage? And instead of just saying, I'm sorry, those, I don't know what I was thinking, or whatever the answer would have been, he avoided that as well, which is, I don't know tactically whether that made sense.
Right. I think on the candidate issue, a lot of these attacks have occurred on Twitter. A lot of these attacks, they have been pushed out through whether it's a politician's or a party's account, and you're seeing these things. I think in that particular context, voters have built up a certain suspicion or even an internal resistance to those kind of attacks from politicians, right? They kind of feel that especially if you're putting out a clip, you're misrepresenting the facts. You're not putting everything out there. You're splicing things to say certain things. So I think overall, is this going to really affect voters' intentions, I don't think think it's going to really have that kind of effect, because overall, people are just very skeptical of what politicians and political parties do with the kind of information they have for opposition groups and opposition parties.
See, I think I disagree, and I disagree for the exact reason it worked against the NDP in the provincial election.
It worked in 2015, too.
Right, which is that if it creates one of two impressions. If it creates the impression that the Conservative Party is too extreme, there is a basic tolerance, moderation threshold that has to be met to be the government of Canada. If people believe, as it happened, for instance, to the Wild Rose in Alberta a number of years ago, that you don't meet that threshold, you don't win. Point number one. Point number two, does Scheer look strong? Right? And right now, he doesn't. He looks like he's being buffeted around by this, in my view, and he needs to take charge of it and look like a leader.
Right.
So that's what he tried to do, obviously, on the plane last night, but we're still talking about it. So last word, and then I'm going to ask one more question.
I think you do have a point there. Don't get me wrong, but given the fact that this happened to every party, then you have to ask yourself, does every party we all have this issue? Does anybody look really strong? I think especially when the Conservatives are trying to push out some things on some Liberal candidates right now, how does Mr. Trudeau respond to that? I mean, he hasn't been in the media for the past 2 days, so there's going to be some questions to be asked on his side as well, and we'll see how that party handles it moving forward.
Okay, I want to ask one question. So you can't say your own party. That's the one rule here. But which leader had the best week and why? You knew you can't say it. Just so that's the caveat. He knows that you can't say it. So
Well, it's very difficult to say, because if we look back, the party that had some of the lowest expectations going into this week is the party that had the best results for this week.
But no, you can't say that.
I didn't say.
You've already failed that
Let
one.
me say it for her.
Yes.
Let me say it for her. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP absolutely had the best first week of the campaign. Conservatives had a bad week. Greens had a terrible week. That's also part of why Jagmeet Singh and the NDP had a good week, is because the Greens had a terrible week. But I think, to their credit, the NDP looked crisp. Their campaign exceeded expectations in all regards. The competency of the effort, the performance of Singh, the performance in the debate, all that, they come out of week one.
30 seconds. He really saved you. You saved your butt there.
I agree with what David has said. I think the thing is, though, when you have no expectations of a party and a candidate, of course you're going to do well. I think now the expectations are going to be set a little higher for Singh. We'll see if he performs in week 2. Right.
Okay, Shakir, Michael, David, that was great. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it.